So principles. These apply equally to face-to-face interactions. Respect, humility, and patience, awareness of own positionality and privilege, offsetting biases, checking these throughout the whole process. A bias is an inclination or prejudice towards a person or group, especially in a way considered to be unfair. So we need to keep this on check. Acknowledgement of power dynamics. These exist between us as facilitators and the group, but they also exist within the group. So we must remember to constantly be aware of them. Flexibility and openness, gender sensitivity at all times. We know that women have so many more barriers to access than men in many contexts. Seeking for diversity. This is central to innovation and thinking outside the box. So by recognizing the knowledge that others hold and perhaps unorthodox ways of doing things, we will get to that point of innovation. Some do's and don'ts. Firstly, active listening. This is even more important when we're in a virtual space where we cannot grasp nonverbal communication. So be clear and make sure that everyone is on the same page. Sense the pace of the conversation. Balance the participation of different actors. You can do this by summarizing key points and then inviting new contributions. However, remember that some people won't be able to contribute openly. So think about other ways where they can contribute without being exposed. Leave time for remaining questions or comments at the end. And state that any unanswered questions will be responded to via email. Follow this through. Communicate clear next steps. Don't rush, don't lecture, don't criticize, don't interrupt, and don't dominate. Now, going into the planning of your session. Stage 1. You can find yourself in two scenarios. The first one is that the objective is clear. So you need to think who should attend this session, why, and how can they make the most out of it. On the other scenario, there is no objective defined, but you have a set of people who would be willing to come, and you need to co-create an objective with them. This will increase the ownership of the session and very likely the participation in it. Part of the preparation is also the selection of tools and other logistics. So thinking about the tools, here's a matrix that puts tools according to low immediacy, high immediacy, or low bandwidth and high bandwidth. The term bandwidth refers to the amount of data that can be transferred over an internet connection per second. That's Mbps, megabits per second. To give you an example of how this differs across countries, in Bolivia, it merely reaches 1 Mbps. In Mexico, it's somewhere around the 6 Mbps, whereas in Europe, it's more than 30 Mbps. So that already gives you a sense of how certain tools will be much more challenging to use depending on the geographical location of your participants. So think about what tool or tool combination could work well, but also which one are you comfortable with as facilitator? Which one do you think that wouldn't require you to invest too much time getting acquainted with? Can you provide any support for using the tools prior to the session? Can you provide logistical support? And by which these I pretty much mean, can you provide any access to internet, either by transferring money for some data or perhaps providing a small dongle, a Wi-Fi dongle that in some countries still is quite a very common way for people to connect to the internet. Also think, can you coordinate some of the logistics via social media and support this process and the pre-discussions with social media challenges that are already quite helpful and useful for the people involved? And this includes Facebook groups, WhatsApp groups, Telegram groups. Also, have you consulted participants on the ideal duration of the session, the time zone, etc.? Stage 2, executing your session. So we've talked about the ideal duration of a virtual collaboration session should be around the 2 hours. But I would encourage you to consider if you can leave 30 minutes beforehand, if you can start and create like a buffer time for people to just settle in, start connecting. Those who have any technical problems can come and slowly get used to the space. As I said, having the technical support is essential, and you really shouldn't embark yourself on doing this completely on your own. There has to be another person who's available, perhaps give their phone number so people can text them or send them a WhatsApp, and they are really just taking care of that aspect of the meeting. Icebreakers are a great idea. I think that it depends on your style, but of course it helps very much when people have never met each other. And well, when they have known each other, perhaps it's better to leave a bit of time for like a coffee and cookies moment. So either at the beginning or during the break, you can do an extended break where you invite people to just stay around, chat to each other, catch up, and similar to how they would do it in a normal face-to-face meeting. Now, the tricky issue of recording. We talked briefly about that during the workshop on Friday, and certainly is not an easy answer. It really depends. Why do you need the recording? Who is going to be accessing it after? And how are you going to ensure that it doesn't get to people who should not be watching this, and hence respecting the privacy of your participants? So it's very important that you really delineate clear what is this going to be for, how is this going to be used later on, and get clear consent. Very important to allow for people to withdraw that consent at any point, and you should respect really that. Use of camera and the mic. As we saw, it's not necessary for the camera to be on the whole time. People can choose to open it only when they're in smaller groups, but also it could be a good practice to just have it at the beginning, just to say hello, everyone see the faces of who's in the virtual room, and then at the end to say goodbye. Some people also try to use it when someone's gonna contribute or ask a question, you turn the camera on, but it's up to you and of course the bandwidth. And microphone always off unless you're gonna speak. Finally, breakout groups. Microsoft Teams, BlueJeans, and Zoom are definitely the ones that have this much more developed. And I would say that each of them has tricky things to learn. But what's important is that you feel confident doing it. So it doesn't really matter what's the platform, but it's really where you can manage it and feel that you really know the different options that you have. And of course that the technical support is also really well aware of how this works. So only if you're really confident, dive into the breakout sessions. Follow up. Send a thank you message. I think we all appreciate this. And with that, also add the summary of the key agreements, next steps, and action points. It's always important to have clarity of where this is moving, if anywhere. Optional, again, the recording of the session depends on for what purposes you will need it. Gather feedback on the session. It's very important, however, very challenging. And we are very used in the Global North on the online surveys with SurveyMonkey, G-Forms, etc. However, we cannot think that everyone's used to these digital surveys. I would say that in some cases in the phone they don't run that great, for example. And in that case, maybe it's better to invite people to leave a voice message, a voice clip through WhatsApp or any of the other groups that you set up, and maybe even do a follow-up call. Of course, have a reflection session with your co-hosts to see how you're going to improve for the next time. Finally, just keep calm and carry on. Not everything will go according to plan. Not everything will be perfect, but certainly with practice, things will get better.